Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to join us this afternoon for our second webinar in the series, Schooling in the Era of COVID-19. Today, we're going to be focusing our conversation on ensuring successful transitions for juniors and seniors. My name is Erica Breunlin, and I'm an education reporter with the Colorado Sun. Today's conversation has been organized by A+ Colorado and Education Reform Now, and it's a particularly timely discussion as we find ourselves in the beginning of graduation season. Most all of us personally know at least one senior who's been affected by COVID-19 and not being able to experience so many of the landmark moments that make senior year what it is, including things like prom and graduation. In addition to losing out on these events, these students are also stepping into their next chapter with some degree of uncertainty. For those students who are pursuing post-secondary education, the transition has largely become a virtual one, which leads to all kinds of challenges and really affects whether they move forward with post-secondary education, even after being accepted into schools. We'll dig into some of these challenges today with a lineup of education leaders who span the high school to higher education spectrum. I'll start with a Q&A with our panelists, and afterwards we'll open up our conversation to questions from audience members. If you yourself have a question for one of our panelists, please click on the Q&A icon and type your question into there. Before I introduce our education leaders, I just quickly want to mention again that my name is Erica Breunlin and I cover education for the Colorado Sun. We're a digital news outlet based in Denver, and we're owned by journalists and supported by readers. We focus on telling thoughtful stories about the issues that affect the daily lives of Coloradans, and our reporters have been especially diligent in covering all angles of COVID-19. Becoming a member of the Colorado Sun is simple and takes no more than a few dollars a month. If you're interested in joining us, please visit coloradosun.com/membership. Today's panel includes Joseph Garcia, Chancellor of the Colorado Community College System, which encompasses 13 colleges, 40 sites, and 137,000 students across the state. Before leading CCCS, Joe spent 2 years as president of the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. He previously served as Lieutenant Governor of the state of Colorado and as the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Higher Education. His tenure in education has also included serving as president of Colorado State University Pueblo and president of Pikes Peak Community College. We also have Angie Paccione, Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Higher Education. Angie has more than 20 years of experience in education. She has been a high school teacher, a coach, and an administrator, and also a faculty member at Colorado State University for 9 years. Angie also served 2 terms in the Colorado House of Representatives, ultimately becoming House Majority Caucus Chair. She was part of the Education Committee for all 4 years of her time in the legislature. Additionally, Angie worked for Veris Global, focusing on leadership development, diversity and inclusion, talent development, and change management. Also on our panel is Wendy Birhanzel, Superintendent of Harrison School District 2, a district of about 11,000 students in grades K through 12. Wendy's career in public education spans more than 18 years. She has served as an educator in California and Colorado, and she previously served as principal of Centennial Elementary and Wildflower Elementary. She also previously headed the Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment Department for her district. And rounding out our panel is Nathan Cadena, Chief Operating Officer for Denver Scholarship Foundation, which supports Denver Public School students in accessing higher education, in awarding them scholarships, and in offering them resources throughout college to ensure their success. Nathan has spent more than 15 years in education, working in community colleges, universities, and nonprofits. He has been a career counselor, professional trainer, advisor and instructor, financial aid administrator, and director of college access and success programs. We clearly have a lineup of experts here who can walk us through the transition from high school to higher education. And before we launch into questions, I'm hoping that each of you can talk to me about how your organization or agency has pivoted to support students right now, and a challenge or two you're seeing in serving students right now. Joe, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Erica. Yeah, it's been a challenge, of course, for everyone in higher education, because even for those of us who did a lot of remote instruction, and frankly, we've been delivering online education for many, many years to thousands and thousands of students, but we still had to make a transition to take, the other 3/4 of the students and move them to online. And so we had, in most cases, extended our spring break for an extra week. A lot of universities did the same. to provide some last minute kind of cram training for the instructors, those who hadn't done it, and those who just needed to figure out how in the middle of a semester to move the rest of your instruction to online. We had a lot of support from the Department of Higher Education as we tried to arrange to do some face-to-face instruction in very limited circumstances for career and technical education. A lot of our training is career and tech ed, where you have to be hands-on, whether it's welding or auto mechanics or some of the allied health fields. So we worked with the department, and they worked with the governor to get us an exemption so that we could resume some of that face-to-face instruction. And then we had to do it a lot of different ways. We were doing some synchronous learning where professors were being recorded and broadcasting live to the classes, meeting at the regular time. Another, what we call asynchronous, where students could log on at any time and download the course materials and respond. But we had to, again, working with the department, try to figure out how to provide access for a lot of our students. More than 60% of our students are low income and Pell eligible. We serve half of all the students of color in the state, and we serve in very remote areas where students have very limited access. So we had to figure out not just how to put our instruction online, but how to make it accessible to students who didn't have broadband access at their homes or the right equipment. So I'll stop there. I know you're gonna be asking questions.
That's not an easy challenge to overcome by any means, Joe. Thank you. What about you, Angie? How has the Colorado Department of Higher Education pivoted to support students, and what kinds of challenges are you seeing in serving students right now?
So thank you for that question. And we're supporting students both at the high school level, but also at the college level. One of the things that we started doing is called community conversations on higher education. And so we're reaching out to school districts to talk to high school sophomores, juniors, seniors about what their path forward will be after they finish high school. And of course, we endorse all paths, whether a student wants to enter the military service or if they want to go to both a 2-year or 4-year or even a 1-year certificate program. You know, our big issue is that students need to choose a path and then complete that path, because that's what leads to success. So that's the message we're sharing, and also asking students, even at a time like this, that they still have to complete that FAFSA application for federal student aid so that they can be eligible to get the aid that's necessary for them to continue. And then for the students that are currently enrolled in 2- or 4-year institutions, even our private occupational schools, we're trying to reach out to them to assure them that the schools are going to be taking all of the precautions necessary, and that when we do start, we'll start in a measured way, and that we have the student safety and health at the focus. And so we're having student conversations, had one on Saturday morning from 10 to noon. I'm surprised that these college students made it, but so we're trying to convene students at all hours of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you, Angie. What about you, Wendy? How has your district pivoted to support students right now, and what kind of challenges are you experiencing in serving students?
So similar to the other panelists, taking things remote is a challenge. Our district is 11,000 students, and access to technology is not available for all of our students. We are a Title I district, so about 70 to 75% of our students fall into free and reduced lunch. They might not have access to a laptop at home or high-speed technology, so we've worked with families to make sure they have that access. We've worked with our teachers to put our learning online. I think the biggest way we've pivoted, though, is flexibility. And so you might have a calculus class at 10 usually. Now you might not be able to do your calculus homework till 10 at night because you've had to pick up a job to support your family. And so we've really needed to be flexible on our end to help support our students and understand what they're in charge of taking home at their home life. And then the other thing I think is, in education, we're always about learning, and we're still about learning, but we've had to kind of step up our basic needs support. And so we need to make sure our families have food, they have support to pay their rent, their utilities, because without a place, to live, education doesn't mean anything for them. And so we've really had to not only be teachers anymore, but full care providers, and really getting to know our families and their needs and advocate for them and connect them with the resources so that they can take care of their learning, and learning can become a priority for them. And so really working with our higher education partners, particularly Pikes Peak Community College, to kind of work together to help support that need.
Great. Yeah, I've heard that from many, many districts that they're really stepping up to have wraparound services for not just students, but families at this point. And we'll finish, of course, with you, Nathan. How is Denver Scholarship Foundation pivoting to support students right now? And what kind of challenges are you experiencing in serving students?
Sure. As you may know, we serve students from 9th grade through college seniors. So within that spectrum of students, we have seen lots of different changing circumstances, which has caused us to pivot from, at least in our college access program, where we serve about 5,000 students direct facing within the schools. We've had to pivot from an actual cultural, present, physical space to virtual student services. So fortunately, we've been able to rely on our partnerships with districts and higher ed institutions that have kind of blazed those trails, at least to start with at scale, serving students remotely. Being the fact that we serve largely first-gen low-income students, it's really forced us to rethink all of the work that we put in over the last several years working with these students as they have a particular idea of what college should look like. And partially, that's us who have experienced the system already. So rethinking a lot of the work and expectations that have taken place over the past 3 months as we've taken our services virtual, changing the different mindset around college fit academically, financially, and socially, when all three of those factors are very uncertain. The other challenge that is facing all of us, but our advisors who are really buckling down over the summer, is keeping the mindset of having students move forward. When there are some messages out there talking about gap years and we don't believe that lowering expectations for students moving forward is the way for the populations that we're serving to go. So we are really trying to help students figure out how to make sure they move forward, keep a culture of high expectations, and make sure that we help reshape what higher education is going to look like for these students.
Absolutely. So you certainly want to keep that continuity going and bridge them straight from high school into higher education.
Absolutely.
Great. We will turn now to our lineup of questions. And again, if you have an audience question to submit, please click on the Q&A icon and type it in there, and we'll turn to those in just a bit. I want to send this first question to you, Angie. Do you have an existing peer-to-peer mentoring program? And if so, how will that change during this time? If you don't have one, are you thinking about implementing one during this time?
So in terms of peer-to-peer, what the department does is we convene the presidents of the institutions. I'm convening with them once a week. We usually convene once a month, but since this virus hit, we've been convening once a week so that the peers, their peer organization, if you will, can have those conversations that we just help to provide the space for that. We convene CFOs of all the institutions, the chief academic officers. So we are the central convener, if you will, and we have continued to do that. We are beginning to convene students even more. We have to admit, we weren't convening students as much as we'd like. So now we're doing that even more. And just one of the other things about that is we do have a program, a campaign, if you will, called No Lapse in Learning. And that campaign is to try to get laptops into the hands of students who do not have them. And so there was a request for about 800 or so laptops, and we were able to get about 650 that have already been distributed. And we're still trying to get those last laptops into the hands of the students. So we're trying to do, as a State Department, there's only so much we can do, but we are convening all of the principals so that they can have those conversations.
And do many four-year institutions in Colorado have their own peer-to-peer mentoring programs?
And when you say peer-to-peer, are you talking about for the administration or are you talking about for the students?
Well, I'd like to focus on students right now.
Yeah, so I think Joe might be able to handle that question a little bit better. There are certainly the student leadership. And so we've been talking with like the student leaders of the campuses. We've convened them and having conversations with them. They do have they use technology to do that, both in platforms that are geared specifically toward higher ed so that students can get messages out to the entire student body. So there's a lot of that happening because they're all remote. So they're using the technology to do that.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, Joe, I'd like to follow up with you on this question. Do many community colleges across Colorado have peer-to-peer mentoring programs, and will those continue during this time?
Yes, but, and there's a big but here, and that is that our peer-to-peer networks generally work for students who are already enrolled. They're other students, they're upper class students working with first-year students. A real problem, I think a real shortcoming that this crisis has really brought into sharper focus is that until they are on our campuses, most of those potential students don't really have the ability to engage with a fellow student. They can engage with our advisors, but given the number of students we serve and how few advisors we have, trying to make sure that they all have an individual contact, well, frankly, I think we're going to fall short. So that's where we need to rely on organizations like DSF, because they've always provided those mentors at the high school. But now with the schools shut down, the challenge that DSF has is the same challenge we have, and it's establishing what is so important for students, especially students who are kind of on the edge of whether they're going to go and whether they'll be successful if they do go. Those folks need some personal contact and personal support. And that's where I think our biggest challenge is right now.
Of really personally connecting with those students.
Right,
And
making that connection.
We continue to have like Gear Up is a federal program that we administer out of our department. And so they have nearly 30 counselors that are out and about, and they are making contact with all of the Gear Up students. Of course, COSI, our Colorado Opportunity Scholarship Initiative, which helps to fund some of the DSF work. So we have those wraparound services, and they are just on a heightened level. And so this is critical because, like as Joe said, there are a lot of students who could get lost in the cracks. And so what we're determined to do is to make sure that we are seeking those students out first so that we can have those conversations and make sure that they have the equipment that they need, that they have the planning that they need so that they can continue their education.
Great.
But let me raise one issue around Gear Up, and that is that Gear Up counselors do travel around the state to meet directly with students on high school campuses. And without the ability to do that, again, we're very limited in our ability to forge those direct personal relationships that are so important to those kind of marginalized students.
Can I? So I think you know, Dr. Paccione and Chancellor Garcia are talking about students that are in the gaps, and I think those are our most vulnerable students right now. You know, the students that were in those gaps, the achievement gaps, the access gaps, those gaps are just broadening right now with all the different blaring haves and have-nots. Fortunately, we are able to partner with 31 institutions across the state. So what they're also understating is that that is part of the summer work that we're doing right now. We're making sure that we do not let that warm handoff fall through the cracks. And I'm sure we'll talk more about summer work in a bit, but that's one of the very important pieces, that each institution puts different peer supports where subpopulations need them. And that it's shown lots of strong outcomes, particularly Community College of Denver, and in those sorts of examples, Metro State University. But it's something that I think we're really, really going to continue to lean into, because we know it's one of those important connecting points that could easily drop off.
You're giving me the perfect segue here, Nathan. As we all know, there are many students who apply to higher education, who enroll, but then who never actually make it to that first day. So I'm wondering what all of you are doing to address the fact that we have summer melt and that some students don't make it to the first day. And how are you tackling this challenge, particularly in a period of crisis? Why don't we start with you, Nathan, at Denver
Sure.
Foundation?
So DSF, we have a history of working with the local school district to take a look at data from work that has happened throughout the school year, to take a look at that graduating class. We divide it by partner institution and partner district, students that have shown particular steps to enrollment. And we make sure that we lean into that work to make sure that they're supported in landing classes in the fall. Since we have been put in this situation over the past 3 months, we have changed our staffing pattern for the summer. Our advisors, which would normally have a little bit of extra time off in the summer, are actually we're changing that model to where we will not have any gaps in staffing and support over the summer. We keep in continual contact. I know that the district has their largest number of summer counselors and summer volunteers that are ready to staff this summer in particular. So we expect that this challenge is going to continue to grow, but we're going to double down our resources. And as one of my colleagues says, we're going to pick up our bigger hammer for the summertime and get to work. So I think it's going to be a collective effort, but I think people are willing to lean into the summertime just for this purpose.
Thank you, Nathan. Wendy, I'm curious what these efforts look like from the high school end. How do you push students to not only make it past the graduation line, but then also really encourage them to be sitting there in class on their first day in higher education, whether it's at home or in a classroom?
I think COVID has actually given us an opportunity to reevaluate our partnership with higher ed. I think there was a summer lapse and they graduated from us, now they're with you, and no one kind of owns them for the 2 months of June and July, and we lose a lot. And that's just a reality. We have kids that would sign up, but they wouldn't show up the first day. And we own that as high school and we own it as higher ed, and it gives us a chance to partner in a better way. In Harrison, we've partnered with Pikes Peak Community College, and every one of our seniors that graduates with a C average or higher will go to Pikes Peak Community College 2 years for free. Right now we have 100 kids signed up for that, and that's really our cohort that we're working through. What that looks like, kind of like Nathan said, we are going to have counselors check in with them over the summer. We will have people from Pikes Peak on those virtual calls. Hopefully we'll get to in person at some point. I think when you look at our population that we serve, which is a very diverse population, the virtual online system does not meet all their needs. They need an in-face conversation where they can trust you, where they can really get to know you, and it's not just a person through the computer screen. So if that means a home visit and we sit on the porch social distancing to support the family while they fill out the FAFSA, that's what that means. But our goal is to really hold their hand until about October, because just entering in August, that doesn't help either, because there's a lot of fall off the first few months. And so working with our local community college, working with our local universities to get a better sense of partnership to support our students. And I think this just gives us an opportunity to focus in that area.
Thank you, Wendy. And Angie, what does this look like at CDHE? How exactly are you trying to address the challenge of ensuring students get to their first day of higher education, especially in this time of crisis?
Yes, once again, you know, the best that we can do is as we do our outreach and as we have our town hall meetings, we are really encouraging all of the students who have made those decisions to follow through with those decisions. And, you know, in the past, I know that I've done a lot of humanitarian service. And so I like to recommend that for some students during a gap year. But right now, because there's so limited opportunities for even doing that, it's not, the message is not to just stay home and do nothing. And so while there are some students for whom a gap year could really benefit them, not today, because you can't do something like the Peace Corps because there's no place to go. We don't want people traveling and congregating. And so the best move, the best choice that they can make is to take that next step to go to the college of their choice and begin their program. And so that's the message that we are trying to convey every gathering and every convening that we have. And so we have one actually coming up on the 26th, the day after Memorial Day, for Boulder County schools. And so though that school district will be hosting our community conversation on higher ed, and that's part of the message that we'll be sending. Now is not the time to stay home. Now is the time to enroll and get started.
Excellent, thank you. Moving right along, what have you changed in the last 3 months with increased flexibility that you hope to continue to offer moving forward, even as things return to in-person learning? Joe, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that we've always looked at is this sort of dichotomy between the traditional classroom instruction and purely online. What we've learned now is we really need to be thinking about hybrid much more often. That is, where students come to a physical location only where it's really necessary to advance their learning, to get a particular skill where they need to be meeting face-to-face with an instructor. But there's a lot of things that we can do remotely. We just need to make sure we have the right kind of, not just technology, but approach, an approach that allows us to engage students. You know, when online first started, the completion rates were dismal because students didn't have the ability to connect either with their instructor or with their fellow classmates. Technology, the way we do things now has really changed, that students can be just as engaged, not just with the professor, but with their fellow students through purely online learning. So we're really ramping that up, and we're making sure that all of our instructors know how to do that, not just a few. So I'm really hoping that we can build on that. And we've also increased access to technology, both for the instructor and the students. So again, we'll be able to build on that more. And that's really important when we look beyond the traditional age students that most of us have been talking about. But about half of our students are older, working adults or non-working adults, but they don't want to come to the college. They want to learn online. So we need to take what we've learned and make that kind of instruction, quality instruction, rigorous instruction, available purely remotely or with limited amount of face-to-face instruction. So that's what I'm hoping we can build on.
Great, thank you. And what about you, Wendy, at the high school level, and really across the K-12 level, what have you implemented with increased flexibility in the last 3 months that you hope to carry forward even as in-person classes resume?
I think following up with Chancellor Garcia, a lot of the flexibility, a lot of the teaching our teachers how to teach in a different day and age, and it's not a lecture style anymore, and it might not be the same lesson you taught last year. We have to do it differently now. For us, there's a lot of equity and access issues that we want to make sure we're addressing. So when we talk about going online, does that mean everyone can really access that, or is that just a great idea in theory? And so making sure we can put that in play and that's the best. I mean, when you talk about a K-12 system, that might not be the best for a kindergartner. It could be good for a senior. And so where do we draw the line with the virtual learning? I think for us, the biggest thing has been the flexibility again, is that we traditionally have students, you know, as juniors or seniors sit in a classroom from 8 to 3, but that might not be the best schedule for them. They might want to go and take college classes outside of that. They might be working a job. And so how do we gain flexibility? And, you know, with the new CDE requirements, it's no longer about seat time. And so this gives us really an opportunity to be creative and make sure that our students are showing mastery in the way they need to show mastery, which might not be the multiple choice test from 1960. And we just have to be, you know, learning and progressing along with what our students need to do. The other opportunity, again, I will go back to, it gives us a chance to partner with higher ed and make sure that that handoff goes smoothly in terms of we're understanding what they need to be successful as college students, and colleges understand where we're preparing them for. And so I think we can either smooth that transition a little bit more with our conversations and work towards supporting all students.
Thank you, Wendy. Angie, I'm hoping you can take this next question first. When it comes to summer bridge programs, summer transition supports, those kinds of things, in order to address summer melt, what are you doing to expand or to really, to expand or change those kinds of supports for students?
Yeah, so, you know, at the higher ed level, you know, we don't spend a lot of time thinking about summer melt, because in the summertime, a lot of college students are doing internships or apprenticeships where they're taking from theory to practice, and they're trying to find those jobs in their areas. What we are finding right now, though, is that some of those apprenticeships and internships have been revoked, including even some jobs that seniors have received that are been rescinded. And so when we think about the class of 2020, in terms of those who are graduating either from high school or college, or students in transition, right now, actually, we have to look at college as we might traditionally have thought of it as, you know, August to May. We have to think about it differently, because actually this summer might be the best time to be enrolled in college. And so changing the way people think about the terms, who says that a semester has to be 3 months, and is that the limit of learning? Is you take Psych 101, you learn it in 3 months and that's it, and can't learn it any faster or any slower. And so we're trying to look at the nature of how we administer higher education and how students engage with higher education beyond just the traditional semester system.
Thank you, Angie. What about you, Joe? At the community college level, is there anything you're doing when it comes to summer bridge programs or summer transition supports for summer melt? Anything you're doing to change how you're supporting these kinds of programs?
Yes, but it's not all new. It's been going on really for the last decade. I mean, think about summer melt for a minute and what always, what was the cause? I mean, frankly, for a student attending who intends to go to CU Boulder or School of Mines, they've applied in the fall. They've been planning that for a year. They have applied, they've sent in their deposits. Those aren't the students we lose. The students we lose through summer melt are the kind of students who typically come to the community college. A lot of our students haven't thought about attending college until the day classes start and they show up on the campus at Pikes Peak Community College and say, I decided I want to go to college today. Can I do that? Now, a lot of those students, when they left high school, they were saying to their friends, to their family, I think I'll go to college next year, but they haven't done anything to prepare for it. So it's no surprise that we have this huge summer melt. People are just disconnected because the high school's done with them, but they haven't arrived on our campus yet. So as Wendy said, there's not that, they're not mine and they're not yours, they're just on their own. And when left to their own devices, especially since more than half of our students are first generation, they don't have parents at home or siblings who've gone through it, so they don't know what you need to do. Again, that's why DSF is so important, because it helps them understand the steps to take. So what we try to do now is contact them before they ever leave high school. And about we serve over 30,000 students now each year who are concurrent enrollment. So they're taking college classes through a particular community college while they're still in high school. And we hope that will allow them to make a connection to the college that will survive that summer gap. This year it's worse though, because it's not just the summer gap where they're disconnected, it's a spring and summer gap. They've been disconnected from the high school physically and from their teachers and their colleagues, and yet not connected to the college. So we are really trying to hit them sooner and more aggressively with reminders, as Dr. Paccione was talking about. Now is not the time to leave your educational dreams behind. Now is the time to kind of ramp it up. We don't have a lot of job opportunities right now. The typical summer service sector job, kind of for the most part, gone away. Now we can say, consider this your job. Enroll, come to classes, start learning some skills that will help you whether you want to complete a bachelor's degree or not. But you will do better if you are taking this opportunity when you can't really do anything else to sign up for classes that we can deliver to you in your bedroom.
Thank you. Go ahead, Nathan.
So as the lines are blurring from virtual and distance to in-person, both learning and workforce connectivity, that is starting to eke its way into conversations about, summer bridge from the secondary institutions to the post-secondary institutions. There's lots of essential experience that research will tell us will help students with persistence and completion, and some of that is experience in their first test. So now those experiences in the summer program is not just a fill in the bubble test, it is log into whatever learning platform the institution is using. And so I think there's some blurring of lines as essentially essential skills, what we used to call soft skills, all those things that we know that students need to bring in that are not math formulas to be successful in both learning. So it's adaptability, it is the resurrection of netiquette for both learning, communication, and also competitive nature for workforce. But that code switching adaptability, I think, is something that we need to institutionalize and make sure that we let students know that that's what's really gonna help students be successful in whatever pivoting system that they need to maneuver. And a lot of that comes with our first gen low income students that have kind of tougher upbringings and know how to handle rough situations and adapt. So I do think that we will see some cross-sectioning of those essential skills that are not only life skills, but are learning skills, because students may need to go in and out of distance and in-person learning depending on whatever flare-ups we experience in the future.
Thank you, Nathan. Wendy, I'd like to pose this next question to you. What kind of anecdotes are you hearing from high school juniors and seniors right now?
So I think we have a few things going on. Our kids are very disappointed they couldn't go to college visits this spring because that's kind of another rite of passage. And especially for our first gen college going students, that's a huge thing for our avid kids to go see what a college campus looks like. And there's a little disappointment that they might not live there next fall if they're going to college. It might be, you know, still virtual depending on where we are. And so I think they are feeling just beaten down with, I don't get prom, I don't get senior skip day, I don't get graduation, and now I don't even get to be a freshman on a college campus. What else are you gonna throw at me? But I will tell you, our first gen college students are the most resilient kids I've ever met. And so they're gonna make it. We just need to put the supports in place to ensure they make it. We have several college students that we are helping push along to make sure that they know that, like Dr. Angie said, this is not the time to take a semester off. We know if they don't go right away, chances are they won't go. And so with our Pikes Peak Alliance, we are having weekly meetings with these groups of students to support them. Is your FAFSA done? Have you registered for classes? Do you have a job lined up? What is that going to look like? What are you going to do when you don't know how to do your math? Who do you talk to? And so really hand holding them through the first semester. Just an anecdotal story. We had one student whose mom passed away last year. And so he had to get a job this year to support he and his dad for rent. And he thought college was just not going to be an opportunity because he had to work. And then the Dakota Promise came along and we showed him how he could still work and still go to college and still, you know, go after his dreams of being a musician. And so really one thing that we've done is individualize the conversation for students. I think when you have college nights or you have some of those big events, it's a big speech and people can't see themselves in that picture. But our counselors and our high school administrators have done an awesome job, along with our local universities, to sit down with each student and say, this is how it can work. Again, they don't have the support at home because they're the first one going to college, so they don't have that support or role model at home. So we reach out and make sure they can see how it can all come together and they can reach their dreams.
Thank you very much. We're soon going to pivot to audience questions, but I have one last question I'd like to pose to you, Angie. What is CDHE doing right now to address the anticipated lower enrollment rates in in-state schools?
Yeah, so this is a big deal because the institutions of higher education really are funded two ways. One is by enrollment, or the tuition that students pay, and the other is from the general fund of the state financing. And right now we know that both of those are going to take a bit of a hit. And so we are looking at what are the hybrid kinds of ways that we can encourage students to attend. In the convening that I had this Saturday with students, one of the questions we asked was, what will it take for you to feel confident to return to a campus for face-to-face kind of instruction? And what does it look like to you? And so having these conversations, having the task force to determine what does it look like for enrollment in the fall. We're already seeing, unfortunately, that there's a drop in enrollment based on this time last year. But remember, this time last year, this is when students are making those choices about where to go. This is decision season. We had decision day, May 1st. And so this is now decision season this whole month. And so this is the month where students are making those choices. And it seems like right now, students are a bit shy to make the decision, and can't really blame them until we have some certainty about what the fall is going to look like. And so we're trying to instill some confidence that we're making the decisions that will support students and be in the best interest of their health and safety.
Yes, clearly we're still in a very fluid situation. So I know that all those decisions have yet to be nailed down.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much to everyone on our panel. We're now pivoting to audience questions. Again, if any of our audience members have a question for one or all panelists, please click on the Q&A icon and submit your question there. Our first question comes from Representative Tony Exum and is for you, Wendy. What is the approximate number of students without laptops who you're serving with alternative distance learning? What does it look like to serve students with technology needs?
Hi, Representative Exum. So right now, when we did a survey, we have about 70% who do not have access. But I will tell you, when we did our survey, some people thought that having a cell phone was a device, or you know, if they had one iPad, but they have 5 students, that was still a device. But that's not feasible when you have multiple students trying to hit one device to learn. And so we're going back out, and our main goal this summer is to attain laptops for every one of our students K-12. As a district, we are one-to-one for high school, but we are not for K-8. So that's our whole goal in our technology plan, is to get those devices into our students' hands. And then the other goal is to make sure that we are accessing online learning for students that makes sense. Again, as a former reading teacher, I struggle going online for K-1. It's hard to see what sounds a student's making on the other end of the screen for you. And they don't have the supports to make sure that they're making D in the right way. And so it will probably be a combination. Even if we can't go all in person, we'll still need to see some of our youngest learners in person, help them with their learning to read. But our virtual learning is not going to work unless we have the devices first. And so that's our main goal with going online.
Thank you.
Can I make a quick request for districts who are one-to-one, especially for the graduating class of 2020? Most students will turn in their Chromebooks at graduation checkout. However, because of summer melt efforts that need to take place over the summer, please, we're pleading for folks to extend the usage of the district technology throughout the summer, just so some of the summer melt efforts can make sure that they still continue with those students throughout the summer.
That's a good point. Our students graduate and take them with them to college.
Oh, great.
Which is very unique.
Problem solved, yeah.
Yeah, great.
Our next question from the audience is for you, Nathan. Please expand upon what summer volunteers and the Denver Scholarship Foundation program expansion are doing and how that works specifically with districts.
Yeah, so with the districts, we typically divide and conquer with summer melt caseloads just to make sure that we operate efficiently. So with that, the district will have their full-time counselors off for the summer, but typically they would use any unused counselor corps grant money or any other college and career readiness funding to allow for additional time for counselors to stay on over the summer. What I'm hearing this summer is, with or without that funding, that we are seeing an influx of interested volunteers to go out and help out with some of the summer tasks. And although we talk a lot about application completion, both admission application and FAFSA completion, when we talk about crossing the finish line, it's really about walking students through the verification process, getting them enrolled in attending a college orientation, and actually having a schedule in hand. So those are some of the volunteer pieces to where once we cross that border of students graduating and having the initial applications done, if the organization or district has the capacity to help lead the volunteers, it's helpful to divide up data as far as what work has been done and then what work can be done to cross the finish line.
Thank you, Nathan. I'm hoping that Joe, you can take this next one first. This question comes from Lisa. Much of the research shows that retention and persistence rates are lower for both full-time and part-time college students relative to their peers in in-person programs. How do panelists in the higher education space think about how this information changes supports and the decisions to return to in-person learning? How can high schools better set up students to be successful in online programs?
It's exactly correct that generally online instruction programs have lower retention and lower completion rates. And again, it's all about forging that connection that's so important between a student and fellow students as well as the instructors. So again, we've seen a lot of progress, and what we've seen is that gap is really narrowed in the community college system over the last decade, but that's been through a very intentional focus on forging those connections. That really is important. So many of our students, frankly, at the community colleges haven't persisted in either face-to-face or online. One of the things DSF figured out early on was a lot of the students that they were supporting to send to our colleges weren't being successful. And so what we've all realized is that we need to invest more, not just in what happens in the classroom, but in terms of student support outside of the classroom. So as we have more folks who are working with the students in academic advising and just advising, life advising generally, but just forging those connections. Also with the online now, where we can have, as we're doing now, a screen that shows everybody who's talking. Now we can do that with classes where we do synchronous learning, where an instructor's online, Erica, so we can see you, but we can also see the others who are talking, who are responding, see how they're reacting. Those are things that are making a tremendous difference in keeping students engaged, on track, retaining and completing. And so the last thing I'll say is we've moved away in the past from just making sure that a student enrolls in college. I mean, that used to be the high school, they cared about whether you graduated. In the college, we cared about whether they enrolled. No one really focused enough on what we need to do to keep them enrolled and to graduate. So our focus has really shifted from access to completion, and completion where we close equity gaps so that everybody's completing, not just white middle-class students. And I think that whole shift in focus has led to improved retention rates through whatever instructional delivery method we're using.
Thank you. Angie, I'm curious if you can answer this question. How can high schools better set up students to be successful in online programs?
Is that one for?
That was for you, Angie.
Oh, okay. So one of the things that we have learned, and we have a great example in the state, CSU Global has been an online program since its inception, and they've had tremendous success. And so there's some wisdom that we can glean from how they have been successful. And so that's one of the things, again, trying to be a convener and a resource to the state to say what has worked. They've been doing virtual commencements. They've been doing virtual student tours. They've been doing it all virtually. And so we do want to learn from the schools that have done it well, how they have done that. I think in terms of high school students, here's another sort of a serendipitous benefit, is that this last spring semester, our high school students have had to engage in online education. And so they have at least gotten into the rhythm and the cadence of what it's like to actually be instructed online and engaged online and complete courses that way. So their transition to the fall or to even summer courses is going to be a whole lot easier because they will be some sort of hybrid model anyway. And so I think that at least for this graduating class from high school, they will have some of the skills that are necessary to make a smoother online change to their education in the fall. So we're fortunate for that. And even the juniors this year, they may have to do some hybrid when they're a senior in our high schools. And so I think the wave of the future is, just like it is in industry, is how can we have everything be kind of on demand? During the weekends now, I'm trying to binge watch stuff so I can get my mind off of so much Zoom. And you can get everything on demand on HBO or Showtime. And so we have an on-demand culture. And now it's really time to make sure that our education can also be on demand when it's needed. And so students are ready to do that.
And concurrent enrollment is a great example, because concurrent enrollment now allows so many juniors and seniors, fully a third of all juniors and seniors in Colorado are taking a concurrent enrollment class, many of which are delivered online from the local community college. So while they're taking some of those concurrent enrollment classes there at the high school, a lot of them are, again, signing up for an online class at the community college. And so when they come to college, or when they sign up for college classes that are online, it's not their first experience with distance education.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Joe. Our next question from the audience comes to you, Wendy. Colorado Education Initiative put forward information from their needs assessment across all districts. And from the data, most districts said they're confident supporting high school juniors and seniors. From your experience, can you share whether you think that means to graduation or to and through graduation to find success in higher education or their career?
I think it's to graduation. I think as college changes, we have to be realistic about, are we preparing them to be successful in college? And there's always been a disconnect, in my opinion, between K-12 and higher ed, and this is exposing it in a different way. And so we need to work together to see what does the future of college look like, and how do we bring that to a K-12 setting so we can prepare them in a better way. If we teach all in person and then they go to a college and it's virtual and they fail, that's bad on us because we didn't plan accordingly, we didn't prepare them. Like Chancellor Garcia said, we encourage every one of our high school students to take at least one college class, and so they are prepared to go to college, and they can also say, I've succeeded at one college class, so now I can do it. All it takes is one little class to get them to buy into their belief that they can do it. And usually it's the AAA Ice House class that is really teaching them how to be a college student and what it's going to take, like what's the workload going to look like, what is the reading load going to look like, how do I interact with my professor, how do I use the D2L system, the online learning system, kind of the basics that we just assume kids know when they walk across a high school stage and they're college students, and we just assume they're going to be successful. So really, if high schools can own some of that piece in junior and senior year, then we can get that transition more successful for our students working with our higher ed partners.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. I think we have time for one last audience question, and I'd like to pose this to Angie and Joe. With pending likely budget cuts to the Colorado Opportunity Scholarship Initiative and higher education in general, how are institutions of higher education thinking about ensuring that higher education is affordable and attainable for students? Why don't we start with you, Joe?
That's what we think about every day, and that is a challenge because, as Angie said earlier, we get our money from essentially two pots, tuition and state general fund, and both are facing very significant declines. We're down anywhere between 25 and 45% in fall enrollments, compared to where we were this time last year. We're anticipating cuts in the general fund from the state being down 20 to 30%. So what we're again trying to focus on is where do we save money elsewhere? We hate to cut, for example, people say, well, cut everything outside the classroom. But a lot of what happens outside the classroom, those student advisors, those learning labs, those things are critical to student success. So we don't want to cut things that involve student success. We also have in the past, higher ed's always been encouraged to reduce costs by teaching to larger class sizes. Well, we can't do that now because we're so concerned about the spread of COVID-19. So we want smaller class sizes. We also want to do more things online, but we've learned that there are a lot of additional costs to doing things online. Part of it is in terms of providing resources to the students who don't have them. So we haven't figured out yet how we're going to do this. We know we've imposed no salary increases for anybody. We're in hiring freezes. We're going to do everything we can to avoid increasing our costs. But what we have to do is really decrease our costs because our revenues are going down and we have limited reserves to help make it through. We're hoping that we continue to lobby our federal, our congressional folks to help them get more money to the colleges that we can use to fill some of those revenue shortfalls. But that's, it's not happened quite yet.
Thank you, Joe. What are you thinking in this climate of budget cuts? How are higher education institutions thinking about making sure higher education is affordable and attainable for students?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're really happy about is that the Joint Budget Committee and of course the governor's office and the department really advocates for maintaining the amount of state financial aid that we are making available to students. So we have roughly $200 million that we make available to students. And we're also pushing to have some flexibility that in terms of who receives those dollars. Right now, there's essentially 4 pots. Students who have designated need based on their FAFSA, that they are students in need of financial aid, need-based. There's work study, there's merit-based, and then there's also some financial aid for graduate students. And we're looking at maybe having the flexibility to move those pots around so that we can really address the shortfall in need-based financial aid to make sure that those students who can't afford actually can with that financial aid. So that's one of the things that we're doing. We're also advocating, and we're getting some good support on maintaining some funding to, or significant funding to COSI, because the College Opportunity Scholarship Initiative with folks like DSF on there have tremendous outcomes, the best outcomes that we've ever seen. So when a national average is that 68% persist from year 1 to year 2, our COSI scholars persist at a rate of 94%. And so we know that these are interventions and mechanisms that really work. So we definitely don't want to put the burden on the backs of students. We did that after the Great Recession, where the student portion of the funding for higher ed shifted from 30% on the students to 70% on the students. And then we saw the subsequent and predictable student loan debt increase. And so we don't want to repeat the mistakes, if you will, that were made in the past. And so for me, this is an exciting time. We don't have to get, this is exciting because it's a time to renew and refresh and really transform what we think about higher education and how it's funded. But we need all of the great minds and subject matter experts to come together and say, what can we do to make sure that students are able to make it in higher ed and to succeed, and maybe it means that there's some changes coming, and I'm okay with that.
That's a very positive outlook to see that this disruption could lead to innovation that could really completely transform the entire landscape of higher education.
Why not?
Yeah. Well, thank you very much to all audience members who submitted questions, and thank you to our panelists. We have just a few minutes left, and I'm hoping that each of you in 30 seconds to 1 minute can give us your final thoughts on how to ensure a successful transition for juniors and seniors. Nathan, would you like to start?
Sure. I think we need to lean into the silver linings and take the momentum that Dr. Paccione is leading off with as to some of the opportunities, because I think we can find some strengths in different subpopulations that will be a new emergence, a new representation of success. And I do think it's a great opportunity to rethink education from the bottom to the top that is efficient and helpful for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. What about you, Wendy? Any final thoughts on ensuring successful transitions for these students?
Exactly what Nathan said. I look at this as an opportunity to reinvent ourselves in education. It's also an opportunity to hear our constituents, which is our students, and see what they are telling us their needs are. And so we're not stuck in a bubble doing things the way we've always done them for year upon year, but really listening to our students and being flexible and adjusting. But I think the exciting thing you'll hear from all panelists is education still needs to remain an opportunity for our students, and education is a game changer. And so we cannot let that fall by the wayside, but we'll work through all this together and come out better at the other end.
Thank you, Wendy. What about you, Joe? Any last remarks to make about ensuring successful student transitions?
Yes, the important thing is for students to not lose focus now. Right now, there's a lack of certainty. We don't know what's around the corner. We don't know if jobs are going to return in 1 month or not for another year, but we do know that, as demonstrated in every past recession, the people who do best as we come out of economic downturns are those who have a higher education and a marketable skill. So now is the time to really focus on pursuing that education, whether it's online, face-to-face, at a community college. If you don't want to go away to college because you're not sure what's going to be happening in the fall, stay home, go to a community college. It's low cost, whether you take it online or face-to-face. You're moving forward. You're getting courses that you can transfer to that four-year university. You're not losing ground, and that's the key here.
Thank you, Joe. And Angie, what about you? Any final thoughts about ensuring successful transitions?
Yeah, sure. I would say pick a path that's aligned with your passion and your purpose, pursue that path, and complete that path. And the path is your choosing. So we say your choice, right? Your future, but we want you to stay in our state. So I would say pick that path, whether it's 1 year certificate program, 2-year associates, a 4-year bachelor's, or military service. I think City Year is still available for a year of service, at least locally, but now is not the time to sit home and do nothing. By the way, your parents wouldn't like that either. So let's get started, get your education going, and we will help you as much as we can.
Thank you very much. That's a very proactive note to end this webinar on. And thank you so much, everyone, for taking time to join all of us today. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all of those who tuned in for our conversation. And thank you to A+ Colorado and Education Reform Now, 2 organizations working to improve public education. I again want to acknowledge the deep budget cuts that both K-12 and higher ed schools are likely to face as a consequence of the economic fallout from the pandemic. At a time when schools already struggle to provide adequate supports for our most vulnerable students, these cuts will really only further challenge their ability to provide students the education they deserve. And a key question is, how do we navigate these financial blows to spare our most at-risk students? We'll be diving deeper into that question with yet another webinar on Wednesday. We hope you can join us at 1 p.m. for a conversation on smart budgeting in the era of COVID-19. Until then, stay safe, everyone, and thank you again.